Hey everybody, Mark Davis. Here we stand in the immediate wake of our Thursday, April 25th, 2013 program. A lot of attention paid today to the opening of the George W. Bush Presidential Center. This was something that attracted a lot of attention, attracted a lot of people, attracted a lot of President Bush's family, a lot of his friends, and a lot of his critics. We had the so-called People's Response, the somewhat presumptuously titled but vocal group of people for whom it wasn't enough to just see a presidential center open for a presidency they did not like. It's funny, this took me to a memory of, let's say, 2004, when the Bill Clinton Presidential Library opened. I said, hey, he was president, he gets a library. Even in the 1980s, when the Jimmy Carter Presidential Library opened. I mean, this was one of the truly disastrous presidencies of our time, and it didn't occur to me to mount a pilgrimage to Atlanta, to protest, to offer counterpoint to the various tributes contained therein. So there's just something about the Bush critics. They just couldn't let it go. So they had to come here, and they all dressed in big, funny cartoon heads and convict stripes, and they brought folks to town. But one of the folks they brought to town gave me one of the better shows in a long time, and that was Phil Donahue. Phil is iconic to me. I wouldn't say I grew up watching him, because I guess he was in his Chicago heyday when I was probably about 18, 19, 20, getting ready to go to college. And in his late 70s period, he was doing all kinds of things, welcoming a lot of show business people, Muhammad Ali, Chris Christopherson and Rita Coolidge, just to date that period. But he would also do things that were like the shows that he did in the very, very beginning in Dayton, Ohio, welcoming people like atheist Madeline Murray O'Hair, guests that would just infuriate people, freak people out. And I remember being taken on that adventure with Phil, and even though I disagreed with almost everything he ever said, I found myself agreeing with certain guests. I mean, he had Ayn Rand, he had Milton Friedman, he had all kinds of people on whom I admired, and that I appreciated. And I really appreciated this week when he came by and gave us about an hour and a fraction of his time. He was brought here by the Dallas Peace Center. Their definition of peace is the cessation of all hostility and not even starting any war, even a just one. I guess they don't consider any war to be just. My definition of peace is that's what you get when the good guys win. But silly me. Anyway, though, to make a long story even longer, Phil Donahue was in studio with us this past week, and you can go elsewhere right here on 660amtheanswer.com, find the picture of me and Phil, and still looking good at 77 years old. And the full podcast of his visit with us, because it's very telling. I think it was a proper way to herald the arrival of the Bush Presidential Center. Obviously, my legacy on my thought of that presidential center is going to be reflective. We're all going to see the Bush Library and the Institute there through the lenses of what we thought of that presidency. Government got too big for me during the Bush presidency. He was not quite the border warrior that I would have wanted from a Republican president. But there were areas of government that he did make smaller. But the most important thing, all of that pales compared to what he did for me. I feel he did this for me personally. And when I had the opportunity to meet him during a couple of occasions during the presidency, I always made a point to thank him, not just ideologically, not just politically, not just as an American, but as a husband, as a father. I thanked him for what he did to keep my family safe. Because in the 7.5 years of his presidency after 9/11, we didn't have any more 9/11s. And I don't think that was by accident. I believe that it was because we took the war to the part of the world that was trying to kill us. And if you go back and you listen to the Bullhorn speech, 3 days after 9/11 on September 14th, and there he is with the Bullhorn saying, I hear you, America hears you, and the people who knocked down these buildings are going to hear from all of us soon. Still gives me chills to think about it and talk about it. That's real presidential leadership when war is being waged against you. And I don't say this to be unkind. I really, really don't. But the comparison is instructive. Can you, in 100 lifetimes, envision Barack Obama doing something like that? Can you? I mean, this is a guy who cannot bring himself to say the words radical Islam. They stick in his throat. And when you cannot speak truth to evil, how in the world can you expect to fight it? So to the Obama administration, I'd say, hey, Afghan surge, appreciated that for as long as it lasted. Keeping up an active drone program. I actually like the drone program. Keeping Guantanamo open. I know you're drag kicking and screaming to that, but I appreciate that it's still open. And the Obama people wonder, they go, what do we got to do? What do we have to do to get credit for keeping America safe? Recognize who we're at war against, and don't be afraid to say so. couple of reflections there on the current president and the one whom we recognize this week gone by as his presidential center opens out there at SMU. Alrighty, we have, as I talk to you here midday on a Thursday, we have our big Friday extravaganza coming up tomorrow. It's Bill Bennett's Morning in America, hosted by me on Fridays. Oh my. That means we start at 5 a.m., and we go till 8, and then 8 to 10 local show. We're going to wrap up everything nationally, locally, and get ourselves into a big Texas weekend. So thanks for being part of it. Wherever you're listening, wherever you're watching, we appreciate it. Thanks for hanging out here with us on The Mark Davis Show on 660 a.m. The Answer.